Welcome to the Nerve Guys podcast, where we discuss movement and well-being from the brain's point of view. Hosted by Gareth Kelly and James McCambridge, this week's episode is sponsored by the Neuroband, a wearable vision and balance training tool designed to develop posture, focus, and flow. More info at the end of the episode. So no Gareth today. Gonna try and do this one solo. I was lucky enough to get it to the other end of my illness. Seems like Gareth might not have been. But he suggested I talk about why people should train neuro. And I feel like I do that all the time. That seems like all I'm ever doing. So I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to be talking about healthcare 3.0. So it's kind of a concept that seems to be showing up in a lot of different places as like where the future of healthcare and the future of wellness is going. And is basically the idea like, so I guess healthcare one would have been the point where people realized that they could have an actual influence over your health and well-being in general. So, at one point when you got sick, people just assumed that was it. Like there was nothing you could do. And yeah, tough. You're either going to get better or you won't. And it's not really up to us to decide what's going on there. That's just up to the universe to either make you better, or if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be. And I guess as societies grew a little bit bigger, then we started to notice that actually maybe there were similarities between the cases of people where they got better and the cases of people where they didn't. And that's when you got, the first idea of like a doctor or a healer or whatever, who their job is basically to try and figure out, all right, well, what can I do? I'm going to be the gatekeeper of this information. I'm going to try and figure out, when somebody in the community is ill, what can we do to actually make them better? And that was a lot of trial and error. That was a lot of things that seems to be, in retrospect, feels like it was all about making a really good story about why a certain treatment might be effective or not. And it turns out that that actually seems to be the best way of eliciting the placebo effect. So they didn't actually do such a bad job. But a lot of their practices basically went around the fact that if you feel taken care of and looked after, then your chances of recovering and surviving are actually a lot better. So that's kind of cool. But actually, scientifically, there wasn't a lot to the actual methods most of the time. Sometimes maybe. And then when you get to healthcare 2, then the second kind of version is then this idea that we can actually test things and yeah, actually try something out. Say, I'm going to give this to 100 people and I'm going to give something else to 100 other people, and I'll see what happens to both groups. And over time, if I do this enough times, I can whittle it down and figure out the precise combination of things that seems to work really, really well. And this is what eventually turns into the scientific method for experimentation. And that was like the huge game changer for healthcare, which is why we're saying this is now like the second version. It's so different to what we did before, where actually before it was about interpreting, okay, I see this, I think based on what I see, this is probably going to help. And that's the end of the conversation. Whereas now we're moving to a phase where it's the results actually matter. And we have to look at, all right, this is what I gave to you. Now I need to actually find out whether or not it works. And then we find out about all the cool little things like the placebo effect. And it turns out that just knowing that it works isn't good enough, because like we said, if you feel taken care of and looked after, and there's a whole load of other parameters that actually might cause our brain to work harder at healing ourselves. So we had to figure out what those were. We had to figure out what was causing those effects to happen. And then when we do our trials for, medications and drugs and all types of different treatment, we had to know, well, does this work better than if we just made something up? And that is kind of where most of the 20th century we were getting all the big advancements, was being able to run bigger and better scientific tests and experiments, especially as it got into the 21st century and we start being able to link up everybody's research and things like that really, really well. Then suddenly it becomes even easier to go through really, really huge data sets, and obviously computers and stuff help to push that along nicely too. And that's quite cool, but it still has some problems can't that can't really be fixed by using this model of, figuring out what works for really, really big data sets and really, really big and large numbers of people. Primarily, that the answers that you're going to get for that are all about what happens on average. So, if we test a drug and we say that this drug works 60% of the time, or 60% of the time, let's say it has above average effects and it works better than the placebo trial, then we're going to say, well, this is pretty good. We should give this to more people, especially if the negative side effects aren't that bad as well. So if there's not much risk and above 50-50 chance that you're going to get better, that's always a good sign. Maybe you will also have within that, maybe 20% of people are going to get really, really good as well. And then another 20% might actually just have no change, so there's no effect to them. And then maybe there's 20% of people that actually the negative side effects significantly outweigh the positives, so those people get worse. And so that's kind of what ends up getting presented to you when somebody says, "Oh, this is a new medication or a new drug that is safe and approved for use. You should take this because you've got the problem that this treats." And the statistics say that chances are you're going to be fine. And over time, that is going to work out. That's going to help the majority of people, the majority of time. So actually, it's kind of an effective way to do things. Where the problems come in then is, number one, how close are you to the kinds of people that are getting assessed? So if you're not within like the average category, so there's, a lot of reports that a lot of these studies are going to be taking place at, the top neuroscience university or the top heart disease university or something like that. And there tends to be at the top elite universities, let's say, certain types of people that are more likely to be getting in. So I believe the acronym is weird, like white. Not even sure I'm going to remember this, but white educated from industrialized nations, rich maybe, and democratic. Let me know if I've got that wrong. I think that's what it is. But either way, you get the idea. There's more likely to be a certain type of person who's going in for those experiments. You're not, let's say, if you're somebody who lives in like a tribal village in a rainforest somewhere, you are still human like the other people in the study, but given all of the possible genetic differences, all of the possible cultural differences, locational differences, and everything, it's maybe not such a guarantee that you're going to be within this, 60% that got the really good result. You still might, but maybe if we're rolling the dice, the odds might be stacked a little bit more against you being confident about that, and maybe you might be in that 20% that gets nothing, or the 20% where things get worse because this particular medication or this particular course of action just isn't as good for you. um and so that's one way that this can be a problem. And then the other way that it can be a problem is what happens as you start to live longer and longer. So if you have to roll the dice every single time you have an illness that needs a medication, no matter how well the dice is loaded in your favor, if you're constantly rolling all the time, then there's a good chance that eventually you're going to find the one condition that you're going to get where actually you would have been in the outlier category if you had participated in that study, and then you're going to get the course of treatment that's actually really bad for you, but nobody has any way of knowing. And again, from everybody's point of view within this healthcare environment, the best course of action was still to give you that treatment, that drug, and to take things from there. So that's kind of where, if there was big flaws in the system or like big problems, that's probably where they are. But again, that's not to say like these mean that the benefits aren't worth it or anything, but that's just to paint the picture of like where we're at with healthcare 2.0. And that was the best that we could do with the technology, the people, the world as it was. That is the best possible outcome, let's say, of that world. But as the world keeps changing and progressing, then there's the chance for things to change. So that seems to be, and again, if it changes slightly, then we don't make a big deal out of it. So this idea of like healthcare 3, is there a third wave of healthcare coming, is coming out of the idea that actually it does seem like a lot of this stuff is changing kind of significantly. Where I came across this first was in a book called Outlive, by a guy, I'm just checking it now, Bill Gifford and Peter Attia. Sorry if I pronounce those wrong. But in that book, they talk about the idea of healthcare 3 is where healthcare actually is going to be less centralized, as you go to you have to go see the hospital or the doctor, or you always need to go to the place where they know what to do, and you're just kind of like the passive recipient of your own healthcare and well-being. And actually the shift is going to come now onto us, where in order to maintain the peak quality of life that we want to have, actually we're going to have to take control, a lot more control over our health. And you see that already happening in a load of different ways. So one example, all of these different devices, now that we've made technology a bit better, we've got all these devices that you can wear that gives you information that you used to have to travel to the hospital to find out. And we've got all these resources in our pockets that can give us information about all different types of illnesses and conditions, and just information about treatments for things that, again, at one point we had to go and speak to a doctor and they had to tell us and give us the information, because the only way to know the information was to learn it and study it. And that took years and years and years, and obviously you don't want to get it wrong, and so you have to have somebody very, very qualified to do that. Now that's still kind of the case, because all of the stuff that we look up online, you all know this, when you wake up with a headache and you Google it, Google's going to tell you, well, yeah, you might be dehydrated, you could be having an aneurysm, or you might just hate your boss. There's tons of different reasons why, and the more sensationalist ones at the moment seem to be the ones that pop up first, or even if they're not, they're the ones that we notice and go, oh good God, this isn't good. I definitely need some help. So then you go to a doctor who says, yeah, actually, no, there's nothing to worry about. So I'm not saying that like where we're at is it's a really good idea that you just need to look up your own symptoms and stuff, but it's possible and it wasn't possible before. And that's potentially indicating the start of this shift, which is kind of exciting. It's kind of one of those things where like when you're at the beginning of something, it's a bit scary because yeah, you can just look up false information all the time and it's not necessarily going to be good, but that kind of stuff has been getting better and better, and with all of the kind of wearable technology and things like that and all of the information that you can get from the world around you, it actually seems like, you could imagine a world where at some point you will be able to just get all of the information from yourself and whatever devices we happen to be relying on in the future. And yeah, healthcare will just be run as in you will learn how to read the signs and signals coming from your body. You will have devices that will be able to do the stuff that you can't do. And to me, that's kind of cool. The other place that you kind of see it happening as well is with mental health, particularly. So I guess it was just the fact, I mean, mental health has always been a thing that people struggle with. And it seems that nowadays it's just spiked like crazy. And whether that is whether that is something that we've done, whether that's just worked technology has advanced far enough to actually just push us to our cognitive limits, and so suddenly we're able to experience stress that we weren't able to experience before. I don't know, we'll talk about that another time maybe, but with mental health, any kind of mental health issues that you have, if you go see somebody for it, before you would have been prescribed, just take this will make you not feel sad anymore, not feel anxious, whatever. Um, but as we do more and more research on it, it actually turns out that that doesn't seem to be the helpful thing. It doesn't work well enough for us to continue to use it. And the thing that does seem to be working well enough is to teach you how to manage and understand and process and treat your own emotions. So when you go see your therapist, very often, they'll help you get half of the way, but the other half of the work that they're doing is trying to bestow the information onto you of how you can actually turn these situations around and learn to cope better in the situation that you're in. Similarly, to mental health is chronic pain, which actually can kind of be classed as a mental health issue as well, because it's all about how your brain processes pain signals. And so the whole thing is done internally. It's pain signals firing in an unhelpful and unhealthy way. But with chronic pain, most people get to a point where you keep going to the physio that gives you the massage, you keep going back to all of these people and saying, just fix it. It's still here, fix it. I want it gone. And over time, you just start to realize that actually that doesn't work, and there is some degree of ownership that needs to be taken simply because of, now that we know how it works, how the signals between the body and the brain work, we know that it can't just be done passively from the outside. How you think about your conditions that you have and how you manage and regulate your behavior based around that is also super, super important. So there's some things where actually, the outside help can do the job, but there's so many things where what you need to do is figure out, you're not necessarily having to take the whole reins and do the whole thing, but you got to figure out which bits cannot be done by somebody else, which bits actually need to be done by you. So to bring it all back, well, to like why do I think people should be looking into the brain? It's specifically that it seems to be where healthcare is heading, that the ownership of things is eventually going to be passed completely onto us. We're in that kind of shift that, I don't know how long something like that takes. You read it in history books, like the Industrial Revolution just happened, and it seems like it happened super fast. But super fast, is that going to be 20 years and I'll be in my 50s? That's sounds kind of slow to me. So yeah, who knows? But yeah, understanding how your brain works and functions, and understanding how you can actually listen to your own body, to me, is going to be really, really important as we discover more about the brain body connection, and just how your mind actually influences your physical potential, your physical ability to get up and move around, and be happy and healthy, and all of those things. And as technology progresses, like we kind of said with the mental health stuff, it also seems likely that as humans we're going to figure out the way to push ourselves to the very limits of being able to cope, no matter what comes our way. So actually, even if we might be able to get along just fine right now without understanding all of the signals coming from our body, at some point that's probably not going to be good enough. And some people might say, well, what about all the wearable tech? Maybe eventually, Elon Musk is just going to be able to implant a thing so you don't have to worry about it. I don't know. I don't think it's going to work like that. I I struggle to see how, unless they invent a chip that's actually able to start taking over conscious aspects of your mind, which I think a lot of people would not necessarily like the idea of, I would struggle to see how a lot of those meaningful connections between your brain and body can be made without you being able to kind of sense and feel into what is going on with yourself. Thank you for checking out this week's episode. As always, we'd appreciate if you'd like and follow or subscribe. If you have any questions, or if you're interested in workshops or one-to-one coaching from Gareth and James, send us a message on the Nerve Guys Instagram page. Finally, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the Neuroband, our very own product and the sponsor of this video. You'll find a link to the Neuroband in the description of this episode.